Hello there, my beautiful internet friends. Welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for joining me here today. Something I get asked about probably more than anything on this channel, whether it's through comments or direct messages, is about relationships after trauma and specifically relationships after abusive relationships. I am in a almost, I think, 7-year relationship with my now husband. We dated for 3, we've been married for just about 4, and it's not been a super easy journey. I know that before I started dating Brian, I was pretty convinced that, first of all, no one would ever want me again. And secondly, I didn't know if I ever wanted to risk being in a relationship again because it had caused so much harm in my life. But eventually, I started dating Brian and it was great, except I noticed that there were some very specific issues that came up for me. I don't think of myself as a combative person, really at all. I don't think most people who know me would ever think of me as a combative person. If I find myself in conversation with someone who disagrees with me, I really enjoy those conversations because I feel like there's so much to learn there. So if we're talking about religion or politics and you are on the polar opposite side of the fence from me, I want to listen, I want to learn. I don't usually ever get angry. I'm not combative. That's always been a big part of my personality and something I've tried to feed into and nurture. However, when it came to being in a relationship with Brian, I found that I became incredibly combative and harsh. Whenever we would get in an argument or a disagreement or something came up, I felt like I had to be right, and it wasn't about being right, it was about surviving. It was about the fact that this was like a life or death situation, even though it wasn't, and I had to come out on top. And that was such an unhealthy way of existing and thinking and being in communication, but it's also honestly where I was for a long time. Every once in a while I find myself falling back into that if we have a disagreement about something where it's like all my internal claws are out and all my defensive armor is on. Brian hasn't done anything to deserve that, yet it exists. When we've been in traumatic situations, when we've been in abusive relationships, we develop survival skills, and also many of us have triggers for the trauma that we've experienced. For me, being in any kind of disagreement or argument set off all those triggers for me, where I suddenly felt like I was being attacked, even though, again, I wasn't. And it honestly felt like I was a scared animal cornered, just trying to fight my way out of something when we were just disagreeing about a minor issue. Like I said before, this is not at all what my personality is, and it wasn't a pretty part of me. Every once in a while, it'll rear its ugly head again. But I wanted to acknowledge this and talk about it because I know so many people who find themselves in the same boat after abusive relationships, of being combative, of turning into people that they don't really want to be, of functioning in relationships in a way that doesn't seem particularly healthy, but they can't seem to stop it. It took a long time for me to notice that I was being combative, and even a longer time to realize that the feeling behind that was fear, was terror that I was gonna get hurt again. And so hence the feeling of being a small animal backed into a corner, terrified, trying to fight my way out. Because any kind of disagreement triggered all those alarm bells in me that something's wrong with this person I'm interacting with, and I have to fight my way out. Trauma is a funny thing, and it messes with your brain. It changes the way we think, it changes the way that we function. And one of the weirdest things about it is when you are in a situation that feels, it doesn't have to be like, but feels like a situation in which you were hurt or traumatized, you may find yourself reacting to the situation in front of you as if it was the other situation that was very bad for you. You start communicating and reacting in the present situation as if you were in the past very bad traumatic situation, because that's what your body remembers. Your body sets off all of these alarm bells and tells you something's wrong, something's very wrong, and you start behaving, you start feeling the feelings that you were feeling in that past situation. Maybe you start getting really aggressive, or you freeze up, or you run away and can't deal with a conversation. There are many trauma responses, but it's not abnormal for these to come up in relationships. For me, this goes back to the 3 reactions that we have to trauma, which is fight, flight, or freeze. I've experienced all of those. It's not like our bodies just pick one and stick with it. We can experience all of them at different times, but it seemed that when it came to conversations with someone I was feeling safe with, feeling comfortable with, and then we have an argument and suddenly I do not feel safe, suddenly I feel traumatized even though no trauma is occurring, I found myself in fight mode. And it can take a minute to work yourself out of that, to figure out what you need. If you find yourself suddenly being very combative and you don't know what to do about it and it feels bad, but you can't seem to find your way out, first of all, you're not alone. I've been there. Many of us have have been there, and there is a way out. There is a way to heal that and to start feeling safer if you're in disagreement, but it is not abnormal to respond that way. What I found really helpful was to communicate first and foremost with my partner, with Brian, as I recognized what was happening, as I realized, okay, if I'm in an argument, if I'm in a disagreement, suddenly my system starts preparing for a battle, and that's not his fault, and I try to remind him of that as often as possible because I'm responding to a past situation, not really the present one. As I noticed more and more that this was a pattern, I realized that what I needed was to temporarily remove myself from that situation, and to do so with proper communication, because I used to kind of just run away or disappear from conversations, or like take a hike, take a drive, which made him feel abandoned, understandably so. But to communicate that I am getting worked up, I am feeling really combative, again, the deeper reason for that is not your fault, but we need to take a break from this conversation for 5 minutes because I cannot think straight right now. Even stepping away from a situation or a conversation for a brief period of time, be it 5 or 10 minutes or a couple hours, can allow your system to kind of calm down, return to normal. It's also just good for communication if you are having a disagreement to take a short break and agree to come back and continue that conversation. It can take a long time for your body to realize that in this new situation, you are safe. In my opinion, the more that you can communicate with someone, if they are a safe person to talk to about this, what you're feeling and why you're feeling it, and again, express to them that they aren't the one causing it, but this happens and you're aware that this happens and they should be aware that this happens, and here's what we're gonna do if I start getting really combative, can be really helpful, can be really useful. I really hate getting combative. I'm super uncomfortable with that. I dislike that part of myself. But again, in those confrontations, in those disagreements, I felt like it was a life or death situation, so I started responding as if it were a life or death situation, and my responses were thus very combative, very exaggerated, very harsh, very to the point, because I felt like I had to make it out of that. I had to survive, I had to win, and that is not a super great way to communicate with your partner if you're trying to build a healthy relationship. So it's taken us a long time to figure out what to do in those situations. I definitely don't execute it on it perfectly all the time, that's for sure, but I am so much better than I was. I feel a lot safer in conversation now than I did even a year ago, and especially like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. Like I said, it is not at all unusual to find yourself being really combative in conversations. It can take a while to figure out what you need to heal, what you need to feel safe, what steps can be put in place. And again, if your partner is someone who is open to these conversations, as I certainly hope they are, talk about how that can be done, whether it's taking a break or something else. If you know of other suggestions that have helped you, I'd love to hear them in the comment section down below. Honestly, working through the underlying issues, working through the trauma that I have has been the biggest help in all of this. Again, that doesn't happen overnight. For me, therapy has been massively helpful. A lot of self-reflection, a lot of journaling, and as much communication as I can muster have all been very beneficial to me. And I'd really like to hear what you have to think on this. Have you found yourself getting really combative in conversations when that's not really your personality? Do you find yourself going into fight, flight, or freeze? Leave me a message in the comment section down below. I will definitely read it if you feel comfortable sharing. I read all comments, though I don't always have a chance to respond, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you guys so much for listening today. I really appreciate it. If you like this kind of content, feel free to give this video a like or subscribe to my channel. Here on Trauma Talk, we talk about life in the aftermath of trauma, and we focus pretty heavily on mental health and sharing personal experience. So I'd love to see you back here. Thanks again. I love you guys. I'm thinking about you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.